Morrowind starts with an implicit promise. After a strange dream, you find yourself on a ship, alongside a fellow prisoner, Jube. As you wait for the guard to approach, Jube displays an awareness of his surroundings by noting the guard's arrival. Instead of a cutscene, you, the player, are given control and invited to follow the guard. As you step down onto the dock, another guard approaches you, as if he has just seen you emerge from below deck. After you have provided the requested information, the release papers are placed on a table, allowing you to pick them up, rather than having them magically appear in your inventory. The guard's instruction to speak with Celes Gravius is accompanied by the sound of the door unlocking. These small details, fully voice-acted and carefully choreographed, set the expectation that Morrowind is a dynamic and responsive world. This impression is further reinforced by what is likely the player's first quest, uncovering Fargoth's hidden stash. You must climb the lighthouse and wait for nightfall, observing the passage of time and the changing environment. As you watch Fargoth sneak around with his torch, you begin to feel that you are part of a living, breathing world where events unfold organically and independently of your actions. But did Morrowind fulfill this promise? On the surface, the answer appears to be no. Contrary to the impression given by the opening sequence, the populace remains frozen in place no matter the time of day. There is no economic activity, consumption, or movement of goods. If you choose to wait several days, months, or even years, the world will not change in any way. It is a static canvas waiting for your input. Let's take a quick tangent. Immersion has become a popular term when it comes to role-playing games. It seems to refer to the unquantifiable satisfaction of inhabiting a game world. But lately, the term has become associated with tedium. Managing hunger, managing thirst, managing sleep, making sure there are visible bathrooms in the game. While I understand the desire for managing needs in a world with a day and night cycle, I think the tedium that comes with it is rarely satisfying and does not add to the plausibility of the world. This is where Morrowind's technical simplicity shines. Like a well-crafted novel, it trims away the mundane parts of life that don't ultimately serve the core experience. Drama is life with the dull bits cut out, as the saying goes. A story does not need to depict every single ordinary moment for it to feel believable. It just needs to imply a fully realized world operating beyond the visible scenes. Yes, when I return to Caius in Balmora, I know that his model has remained in that tiny room, no matter how long I have been gone. But engage him, and he speaks as if operating in a world constantly in flux. Deals being made, meetings occurring, intrigue unfolding in the background. As players, we're invited to suspend disbelief that might arise from observing the static world geometry, and instead, immerse ourselves in the dynamic world being described. The lack of tedious live simulation allows us to use our imagination to fill in the gaps, rather than getting bogged down in minutiae. Plausibility arises not from literal renderings of the common life, but from Morrowind's skilled implication that a living, reactive world operates beyond what is visible. Now, the dynamism of the world is not just implied, and there are a few ways for the player to directly experience it. The most obvious one is crime, or rather the reaction to it. If NPCs see you committing a crime, they will comment on it and may even become hostile. The guards will pursue you and will give you the option to surrender. Should you evade being caught, there will be a bounty on your head, and people will express their concern when conversing with a notorious outlaw. And of course, if you commit the worst crime of all, become a vampire, most settlements will not tolerate your presence. Let's consider another example. When you find yourself in Aldrun, you might strike up a conversation with the local merchants. A few of them will mention Enos Sarandus, a Dunmer down on his luck, who has accumulated debt for rather extravagant items. After you persuade Enos to change his ways, he decides to make amends by returning the goods to their rightful owners. You're tasked with delivering these items, and as you do, the merchant's disposition towards you rises, and consequently they offer you better prices, along with friendlier voiced greetings. Meanwhile, Enos himself finds a new path, leading a more pious life at the local temple in Aldrun. This is a permanent, visible change to the world of Vardenfell as a result of the player's actions. The greeting lines play a significant role in fostering the impression that this world recognizes your actions and reputation. At the outset, you're a relative unknown, perhaps lacking in personality. The NPC's initial indifference towards you is palpable, their cold words barely acknowledging your presence. They might even remark on your humble attire or lack thereof. However, as you make a name for yourself by rising through the ranks of a faction or resolving local problems, the NPC's disposition towards you will rise, and this change will be reflected in their voiced lines. The inverse is also true. The disposition of members from opposing factions will decrease based on your actions and allegiances, evident in the curt or hostile greeting lines used. The contrast, paradoxically, adds to the feeling that this is not a player-centered world. Vardenfell is enmeshed in its own complex web of intrigue, politics, and conflicts that predate and will persist beyond your involvement as the player character. You are an outlander in an alien land, a fact the locals never tire of pointing out. The world does not exist solely to revolve around and fawn over you. But the most important factor in creating the feeling of a reactive world is the agency given to the player. Let's look at the interaction with Aeneas Sarandus again. When you visit his house, after learning of his failure to pay his debts, you have several ways of convincing him to change his ways. If you are skilled in speechcraft, you might just persuade him through conversation. Alternatively, if you have coin to spare, you could bribe him to raise his disposition. Since that's a rather standard Morrowind mechanic, it may not seem impressive, but there are other, more contextual options. Followers of the temple might have a copy of Sarione's sermons on them, and so have the option to quote from it. Or you could change his mind with a conversation over a drink, if you happen to have one on you. And of course, the bloodthirsty players may just kill Aeneas to resolve the matter. When Aeneas gives up his goods, the player receives real items that can be equipped. You are free to keep them, use them, or sell them. Returning them is entirely optional. While not every quest offers multiple solutions, many do, and this flexibility allows players to approach problems in a way that feels most authentic to their character. And since all of the possible ways of solving the problem are not outlined in the quest log, there is a certain satisfaction in stumbling onto a path that was not immediately obvious, but fits naturally with the world of Morrowind. Speaking of quest log, Morrowind infamously did not have one. In my opinion, this omission was a deliberate design choice because Morrowind does not want to be a checklist for the player to complete. Instead, your journal is just chronological notes about the people you've met and things you've learned and witnessed. Each entry is dated, making it feel like a historical record being actively written as you experience events. The journal's open-endedness encourages exploration and paying attention to environmental details and dialogue. Seemingly insignificant comments from NPCs can reveal alternative approaches you may not have considered. This encourages the player to treat Vardenfell as a real, living world with its own rules, not an amusement park. Finally, an essay on the world of Morrowind would not be complete without discussing getting lost. Since there are no quest markers, the player has to follow the directions given by the NPCs. Listening to the people of Vardenfell describe the roads, landmarks, and terrain to navigate the landscape adds to the feeling that this is an inhabited world. Sometimes the directions are vague or even wrong, which can be frustrating, but also can be seen as an opportunity to explore parts of the land that you would not have otherwise. Moreover, there is usually not just one person that knows the way. NPCs may have different qualities of directions based on their knowledge and perspective. This encourages the player to interact more with the local population. In the process, you'll inevitably uncover new subplots and side quests. You may help resolve a personal dispute or hear a rumor about a rare item or secluded ruin to investigate. Before long, you've become entangled in the daily affairs and politics of Vardenfell's populace in an organic, unscripted way. So, did Morrowind fulfill its promise? Even though the introduction was misleading? Even though the world appears to be static? In my mind, absolutely. And I don't think the experience that it provides has been matched by any other game since its release. But if you are still unconvinced that Morrowind's world is a dynamic place that reacts to player actions, I have just one question for you.
Where's your uniform?